Look at all the bad habits you engage in daily, and remember how many times you've tried to quit them without success. You might be able to stop for 2 or 3 days, only to return to the same habits again. And how many times have you tried to adopt a new, beneficial habit, only for your motivation to fade away after a few days, causing you to stop doing it as well? If you're facing this problem, the solution lies in this video. Because in this video, I won't just offer you theoretical advice like have willpower, be patient, or stay persistent. Instead, I'll give you practical, scientifically proven steps that will help you gain lasting control over your habits. And if you gain control over your habits, you'll gain control over your life. In order to eliminate or acquire any habit, you must first understand what a habit is made of. A habit consists of 4 components, and to understand them, listen to this fascinating experiment. In an advanced lab specializing in memory, brain function, and behavior, there's an extremely cold room with a temperature reaching -60 degrees Celsius. This environment allows for precise surgical procedures on rats, where very small sensors are implanted in their brains, enabling scientists to monitor brain activity during experiments. And this is where the exciting story begins. A rat was placed inside a T-shaped maze, and at one end of the maze, a piece of chocolate was waiting. At the start of the experiment, a barrier was placed in front of the rat, and then a specific sound was played. As soon as the rat heard the sound, the barrier was lifted, and the rat began to move, but slowly and cautiously. In the first trials, the rat's brain was highly active. It explored the walls, sniffed the edges, and sometimes turned back. It was trying to make sense of this new environment. Eventually, the rat reached the chocolate. Then the scientists repeated the experiment day after day, carefully monitoring the rat's brain activity. And with repetition, something remarkable happened. In the early days, the rat's brain remained highly active throughout its journey in the maze. But over time, this activity began to gradually decrease. After several trials, the rat would go straight to the chocolate as soon as it heard the sound, and the barrier was lifted. Also, scientists noticed that the rat's brain was highly active during 2 specific moments. 1. At the beginning when the sound was played. 2. At the end when the reward was reached. During the journey through the maze, brain activity became nearly absent, unlike the beginning of the experiment, where the brain was very active throughout the movement. What does this mean? After repeated exposure, the brain began storing these repeated memories in a part of the brain known as the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia work just like a computer hard drive. They retain repetitive behavioral patterns and transform them into processes that no longer require conscious thought. In other words, when the brain repeats a certain behavior, like driving a car, tying shoes, or even walking, it starts storing that behavior in the hard drive, allowing it to perform it later without conscious effort. Over time, these actions become habits, and they're carried out automatically. The brain stops using its mental resources to analyze each step, and instead executes the behavior based on stored memories. For example, have you ever left home, arrived at your destination, and suddenly realized you remember nothing about the route? You don't recall how you got there, the traffic lights you stopped at, or the turns you took. That's because you repeated this behavior so many times that the brain recognized the pattern, stored it in the hard drive, and now relies on those stored memories. And this is exactly what happens with your daily habits. From this experiment, scientists identified 4 components of a habit and how to control them to either eliminate or acquire any habit. The first component is the cue. This is what your brain sees, hears, or senses in some way and interprets as a signal to start a specific habit. For example, when you hear a notification from your phone, that's a cue for the habit of checking your phone. The sound of the notification is the cue. Or when you sit in the driver's seat of your car, as a cue for the habit of driving. Sitting in the car is the cue. For a smoker, seeing someone smoke or smelling a cigarette is interpreted as a cue for the habit of smoking. The sight or smell is the cue. In the rat experiment, the cue was the sound that came before the barrier was lifted. That sound became the cue for the rat's brain. So what can we learn from this? Simply, if you want to eliminate a bad habit, the first thing you must do is identify its cue, because every habit starts with a cue. For example, if every time you're alone, you pick up your phone and open social media, then the cue is being alone. Your brain has linked boredom to opening TikTok. So if you want to get rid of that habit, the first step is to eliminate the cue. How? Instead of being alone, place yourself in an environment with other people. And if you must be alone, prepare an alternative like a book, a sketchpad, or something useful, and leave it in front of you. Apply the same principle to your other bad habits. This video has only briefly explained the definition of each habit component. I'll dedicate a full video to each of the 4 components and explain how you can take control of each one to your advantage. So make sure to turn on the notification bell to get these videos as soon as they're released and benefit from these powerful insights, inspired by Atomic Habits by James Clear. Now, the cue alone doesn't do much without the second component of a habit, the craving. Craving is the second stage in habit formation. It's the emotional engine that drives you to act. Without a craving, there's no internal push to follow through with the habit. The cue by itself is powerless. We need to feel something inside that pulls us to act. It could be curiosity, comfort, pleasure, or even an escape from pain. For example, let's say every day after lunch, you see a cup of coffee on the table. Cue. Suddenly, you feel a craving to drink it to feel focused and alert. Craving. So you pour a cup and drink it. Habit. Notice something important here. What you really crave isn't the coffee itself. It's the feeling you think the coffee will give you. Energy, calm, or relaxation. Here's a key insight. We don't crave the habit itself. We crave the outcome we believe it leads to. In other words, no one really wants a cigarette for the sake of smoking. They want relief, escape from stress, or a moment of calm. That's what the cigarette represents to the brain. To sum it up, the cue alerts your brain to a potential reward. The craving triggers your internal desire for that reward. The behavior is the path you believe will get you there. So if you want to build a good habit or break a bad one, you have to manage the craving. How? For good habits, link them to clear and immediate rewards. For example, after my workout, I'll watch an episode of my favorite anime. You're attaching the workout to something you enjoy. For bad habits, disconnect them from their reward. For example, when I feel stressed, instead of smoking, I'll take deep breaths or go on a 5-minute walk. Now let's move to the third component of a habit, the response. This is the automatic action you take in response to the cue to satisfy the craving. It's the behavior you repeat so often, it becomes second nature. For example, cue. You feel bored, craving. You want to entertain yourself, response. You open TikTok. This is the behavior that has now become a habit. Why is understanding behavior so important? Because this is where real change starts. You can't always control the cues. Cravings often appear without warning, but the response, that's the part you can train yourself to change. In other words, you can't stop yourself from feeling bored. You can't eliminate your craving for fun or distraction, but you can choose. Instead of opening social media, you could practice a hobby or go out for a walk with a friend. Just make sure that friend pushes you to be better. The key here is repetition. Each time you change your response, you're telling your brain, a new habit is forming. And when you repeat that new behavior to the same cue and craving, the habit starts to shift. Here's a simple game plan. 1. Identify a negative behavior you want to change, like opening social media when you're bored. 2. Prepare a simple and easy alternative, like going on a short walk or reading one page of a book. 3. Repeat the new behavior every time the cue shows up. With time, this new behavior becomes the default response. I'll also be making a full video breaking this part down in more detail. Now we arrive at the final component of a habit, and you've probably guessed it by now, the reward. The reward is what your brain ultimately chases. It's the outcome that makes it say, yes, I want to do this again. If the habit doesn't lead to a satisfying reward, your brain won't be motivated to repeat it. In the mouse experiment, the reward was chocolate. In daily life, rewards come in many forms: comfort, pleasure, or even a boost in mood or energy. For example, if every time you feel stressed, you smoke a cigarette and feel calm afterward, that calm feeling is your brain's reward. Or when you're bored and scroll through TikTok and laugh or enjoy the content for a few minutes, that moment of pleasure is the reward. That's why your brain keeps going back. Not because it loves the habit, but because it loves the reward that follows. This is how the full habit loop works. 1. Cue, the trigger that starts the habit. 2. Craving, the emotional desire. 3. Response, the action you take. 4. Reward, the benefit you receive. So, if you want to break a bad habit, make the reward less satisfying or replace it with a healthier one. And if you want to build a good habit, make the reward more appealing and immediate. For example, if you're trying to build a study habit, reward yourself after every session, maybe with a snack you love, a short episode of your favorite show, or a little progress mark on your tracker. These tiny rewards will train your brain to want the habit. Here's the main idea. Your brain doesn't care about the habit. It only cares about the reward. So if you understand how to work with the reward system, you can take control of any habit. That's why I always say, if you understand how habits are formed through cue, craving, response, and reward, then you can take control of your actions and reshape your life. Because if you control your habits, you control your day. And if you control your day, you control your life. Every habit runs through this loop. And if you understand the loop, you can change any habit, whether it's one you want to get rid of or one you want to build. Stay tuned, because we'll be dedicating full videos to each of these habit components. It'll be an amazing series that I believe will change many lives. I'll also share powerful strategies for reshaping your reward system and using it to your advantage. Thank you for watching, and thank you for your priceless time.